Hey everybody, this is my November roundup episode. I finished up 8 books this month, had 1 DNF, and I'm in the process of reading a series at the moment, The Seven Kennings by Kevin Hearn. I've read the first 2 books already, but that was several years ago. The third book and final one in the series came out just a couple months ago, so I'm actually rereading those other books, and then I will finish up probably one of my last new book reviews of the year will be the third book in that series. So I started the month off very strong with Moon Cops on the Moon by C.T. Phipps. It is a sci-fi, cyberpunk, humorous book about a detective who is, you probably guessed it, a moon cop on the moon. The moon is kind of a backwater hellhole. No one really wants to be there, but he's screwed up so many times in the past that is where he is currently at. There is a whole bunch of crazy hijinks that happen. He has a partner who is actually a cybernetic corgi. Yep, cybernetic corgi. And he just ends up being on quite the adventure on that. I gave it a 5 out of 5. I really enjoyed it. I felt like it was one of the better C.T. Phipps books. I've mentioned that I tend to use his books more as palate cleansers. I'm an epic fantasy grimdark fan, and so every once in a while you need something lighter. The second book that I read this month was The Last Ranger by J.D.L. Rosell. It is an epic fantasy that invokes Horizon Zero Dawn in imagery. I found it to be a really, truly epic fantasy. There was just crazy scenery, crazy creatures, fantastical, as well as a really cool plot line. My only downside to this book was that I really disliked the main character. She's a ranger. She has some past trauma that it's made her a little bit on the racist and just pig-headed side. I felt like she made some really stupid decisions that took what otherwise probably would have been a book of the year contender for me and made it a book that I still really enjoyed, but that at times I wanted to throw my phone across the room and curse the main character. I still gave it a 4 out of 5. It is a SPIFFO 9 finalist, and I think that it's definitely worth reading. Maybe you won't hate the main character as much as me. The third book that I read this month is Murder at Spindle Manor by Morgan Stang. This one really shocked me. I was expecting a cozy gaslamp fantasy murder mystery, and while it was that, it also was just so much more than that. There was a lot more of that fantastical element than I expected to have. The main character in this book is a huntress named Isabeau. She is tasked by the nobles, who are 12-foot tall magical beings that look very human-like but can fly, and who knows what else they can do. She's tasked with trying to figure out which one of the 10 guests at Spindle Manor are actually a monster impersonating a human. She gets roped into a conventional murder mystery as well, and the book was just really entertaining. I really loved it. I gave it a 9 out of 10. 4.5 out of 5 if we're on my normal rating. It's another SPIFFO 9 finalist. And I think right now, of the 8 books that I've read in the SPIFFO competition, I put it at number 2 of my favorites. The fourth book I read was This Hidden Legion by Snorri Christensen. It is a historical fiction fantasy centered in the Roman Empire during the height of the Empire period. This is a book that was pretty entertaining, but for me had some real glaring historical inaccuracies that took me a little bit out of the book. Food is a big part of this, and when they're in between their truly epic fights, they like to sit down to have a good meal, and they mention eating tomatoes, potatoes, bell peppers at one point. All of those are things that wouldn't be available for another 1,400 years after the time period that this book takes place. You know, that would be okay if for some reason maybe Rome had actually made it to the New World or something like that. But this is supposed to be historically accurate, aside from all of the fantasy creatures are actually real. So you have harpies, things like that. Describing a feast and a amazing gourmet tomato soup is just something that shows a lack of research that I found a little bit appalling. If you don't care as much about historical accuracy, I did think it was well written. I gave it a 6 out of 10. And it's just one of those things. It's too bad that those are the kind of things that bother me so much. The fifth and sixth books I read are 2 books in the Soul's Harvest series by M.D. Presley, The Glass Dagger, which is book 3, and The Shattered Sphere, which is book 4. I'd already read The Glass Dagger about 5 years ago, but there was a huge break in between books 3 and 4, so I went back and reread it. I loved the entire series from book 1 to book 4. I do think that I personally enjoyed books 1 through 3 more than book 4 because they more covered one individual character in each of the books. So I found like I cared more about what happened to them than the 4th book, which takes a much wider scope. It pretty successfully finished the series off, though, and I still really enjoyed it. Whereas I would have given 10 out of 10 to the first 3 books, I'm going to give a 9 out of 10 to book 4. That I just didn't feel quite as connected with the 4th character that is covered in this book. It is an analog to the American Civil War with a religion based on kind of like an analog to the Abrahamic religions with a god and a devil. I really enjoy the subject matter. I really felt like the book was well written, and I enjoyed all the characters. After the Soul's Harvest books, I read Small Gods by Terry Pratchett. It is my very first Terry Pratchett book. I was not let down or disappointed, and I'm really glad that I finally jumped into that Discworld series. Small Gods is a standalone. It was written in 1992. It follows the great god Om and his chosen one prophet, a novice named Brutha, who is nowhere near the center of power. God Om has fallen mightily indeed because no one really believes him anymore, despite having an entire empire of supposed fanatical followers. They all just follow because they're forced to and not because they actually believe. As the story unfolds, Brutha really grows. It's hilarious, and I found it witty and just a delight to read. A solid 10 out of 10. And the last book that I finished this month is Cold West by Clayton Snyder. It is another one of those SPIFBO 9 finalists. It was only 141 pages long, which I felt like really left me wanting with this book. The story itself is pretty entertaining. It is a grimdark, weird West. The main character is a grizzled war veteran. He has magical ability. The book starts off with him burying his wife with his 2 12-year-old sons at his side. He ends up going off on an adventure trying to make some money so that his boys will do well, and a whole bunch of calamitous events happen. I think if the book had been 200 pages longer, it might have been a book that I would have enjoyed a whole lot more. I felt like there was a plot hole or two that was almost entirely because I didn't understand what was going on or how the thing that happened because there's no backstory. This book is set entirely on its own. It's not in any of the other, not in the world that he's already created. And so all of these characters, there was a backstory between a lot of the characters that I just didn't quite get because there aren't other books in the series, right? It's not a standalone in a series. It's a standalone just completely on its own, and then it's only 140 pages long. I feel like it's hard to do that really well. I think he probably did about as good of a job as he could with it, but some things happened that I felt like that just don't seem to have made sense of why the authorities let a certain thing or two happen. And I think if it had been 200 pages longer and we could have understood, a little more of that backstory, or if it was set in a world that was already there, that it would have been a whole lot easier for me to believe what happened. I gave that a 6 out of 10, and, probably 2 out of the 10 points were taken off simply because it's only 140 pages long, and I felt like it just, needed more. To finish things off, I am in the process of reading, but I'm not sure I will get to finish up the Plague of Giants, which will be a reread. I'm going to read all 3 of those books in the 7 Kenning series by Kevin Hearn. I really enjoyed the books the first time around. I think that my wife actually had The Plague of Giants as one of her favorite books of the year, the first year it came out. There was a long break, just like with M.D. Presley in between his last books in the series, in this case between the 2nd and 3rd books in the series. And so I'm going to go back and reread them. I enjoyed them so much the first time around. I've started at this point rereading, but I am getting ready to go on vacation. I've got a busy week at work to get prepared for that. And then this last few days of Thanksgiving, we traveled, so I just didn't have a lot of time to get reading anymore. I will probably review those books at the beginning of December, actually. Moving into December, I will only be reading 2nd and 3rd books in series for the most part, aside from 1 or 2 more of the SPIFBO books. I'm really looking forward to taking all of December and possibly January to read 2nd and 3rd books in series. Possibly even more. We'll see how many of those Discworld books I end up reading. But I think that's going to just really help me avoid burnout that I felt sometimes the first time around with just doing the podcast, when I tried to make sure that I put out new episodes every single week. And I only had first books in series with the format that I chose. being able to review whole series and things like that will make it a lot more flexible with doing the YouTube show, as well as, occasionally doing my favorite authors and things like that. I hope you guys enjoy my reviews. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe, and we'll keep putting these out. Thank you.